Hey there, come closer to the fire, because tonight we are opening a clay tablet that does not tell a simple story of human weakness. It rests in the half-light like a dry little piece of earth, covered in wedge marks, silent as a sealed mouth. Yet the story pressed into tablets like this is not quiet at all. It says that human beings may not have begun as small creatures crawling upward toward knowledge. It says something stranger, that there was once a kind of human touched by divine blood, able to hear what later people could not hear, able to see what later eyes lost, able to stand nearer to the gods than the gods themselves may have wished. That is the image at the center of our night. Not a fall caused only by hunger, pride, or a forbidden drought, but a slow stripping away of traits that once made humans dangerous. Long years, direct sight, divine knowledge, voices in temple chambers, a memory of something taken. If these slow journeys into ancient tablets, buried gods, and the darker edges of human origins keep you listening, leave a like and subscribe. It helps keep this small candle burning for the next person who finds these old questions in the dark. Now let the room dim softly around us. The fire is low, the clay is waiting, and we will walk carefully, because some of these claims are debated, and the oldest records are never as neat as a modern headline wants them to be. Imagine the ruins first. Mesopotamia in the evening, wide earth, river breath, reed marshes darkening along the water. The Tigris and Euphrates move through the land like two old veins. Mud brick cities rise from the plain, not yet ruins in their own time, but full of voices, smoke, grain, arguments, priests, scribes, and gods who are expected to listen. Now let time pass over them. Walls fall, roofs sink, temples become mounds, libraries collapse into dust. Clay tablets scatter under broken floors and burned rooms. One tablet lies face down in darkness for centuries, while above it, kings come and go. Languages change, and the living forget the hands that once pressed signs into wet clay. Then someone finds it. A brush moves across the earth. Dust lifts. A corner appears. A line of tiny wedges catches the light. The tablet is raised, and the old story begins to breathe again. The source we are following tonight begins with those tablets. Records from Babylon, Nineveh, Ur, and older cities whose names seem to carry sand inside them. It presents a claim that runs against the familiar shape of human origin stories. According to this telling, humanity was not created as merely low, blind, and dependent. Humanity began with a divine infusion. Something from the gods entered human clay. The story points first toward the Enuma Elish. 7 tablets. A Babylonian creation epic from the first millennium before the Common Era, drawing on older traditions. At its center stands a violent ordering of the cosmos. Marduk defeats Tiamat, the primordial sea of chaos. The old world is broken and arranged. Heaven and earth are given form. Authority is reorganized. The gods must decide what kind of beings will carry the labor of the new order. Kingu is brought forward. He was Tiamat consort, a divine being of considerable power, once entrusted with the tablet of destinies in the myth. After Marduk victory, Kingu becomes the material of punishment and creation. Ea is instructed to create humanity from his blood. Clay and blood. Those two words return again and again in Mesopotamian imagination. Clay is the body, wet earth from the river world, workable, fragile, shaped by hands. Blood is life, guilt, essence, inheritance. In this source telling, the blood is not ordinary. It is divine blood, taken from a being who once stood close to cosmic authority. So humanity does not begin empty. It begins mixed. Imagine the first figure in the dim ritual chamber of myth. Clay folded with divine blood. Hands shaping ribs. Skull. Palms. Throat. Eyes. The body cooling under temple air. A breath entering. Not only breath for labor, not only breath for hunger, but a strange inner fire, a trace of the divine world from which Kingu came. The source calls this condition Simtu Ilani, the fate of the gods. We should be careful with such phrases. Ancient words carry layers, and the strongest claims in the source go beyond mainstream certainty. Some scholars would read divine blood as mythic explanation, not biology. Some would read long reigns and divine traits as symbolic memory rather than literal data. That caution should stay with us like a lamp in the hand. But as story, as the spine of the source, the meaning is clear. Early humans carried divine attributes. The text claims these early humans could perceive the Agigi, the watchers of heaven. They could communicate with the Anunnaki without priests standing between. They had access to knowledge systems later closed off. They knew the patterns of heaven, metals, plants, time, and perhaps their own bodies in ways that later people could only remember as legend. It is a strange thought. That priesthood may not have begun as a bridge to the gods, but as a replacement for something once direct. Picture the earliest temples at Eridu and Uruk. Down. The mud brick walls are cool. Reeds whisper near the water. A low chamber waits inside the temple complex, its walls shaped so that sound gathers strangely. If you stand in one place, a voice may seem to come from the wall itself. If you whisper, the room may hold the whisper and send it back changed. The source interprets such chambers as speaking rooms, built for direct divine human dialogue. This is debated. Archaeology can measure acoustic properties, but intention is harder to prove. A room may resonate because builders understood sound, or because later observers want it to mean more. Still, the image is powerful. A human stands in the chamber. No crowd, no pulpit, no amplified priest with a deep voice and excellent posture. Just a person, a wall of clay brick, and a resonance that seems to move through bone. The room hums. A sound too low to be speech gathers under the ribs. The listener feels, not hears, a presence. If the source is right, humans once did not need someone else to translate heaven. They listened directly. Honestly, I have always found that more unsettling than comforting. Direct access sounds beautiful until we imagine what it would do to power. If every person can hear the divine, what happens to the temple official? If every mind can read patterns of heaven, what happens to the priestly archive? If ordinary humans possess the fate of the gods, what happens to the gods themselves? A hierarchy survives by controlling distance. Too much closeness becomes dangerous. The source claims that early humans also lived differently in relation to time. The Antediluvian period, the world before the flood, is described as an age of immense lifespans, direct knowledge, and strange proximity to divine authority. In later records, human life becomes shorter, perception weaker, communication indirect. But before that loss, the source imagines humanity as vast in mind, strong in body, and difficult to govern. The first clay humans were not simple. They were not yet the diminished creatures of later ages. They knew too much. They lasted too long. They heard too clearly. And the gods began to notice. In the candlelight, let the idea sit for a moment. A species made to serve, but carrying divine blood. A created being with access to the same systems its creators use. A worker who can read the ledgers. A servant who can hear the counsel through the wall. Every empire fears that moment. Not the moment when the servant rebels with a weapon. That comes later. The first fear is quieter. The servant understands. The tablet under our imagined glass says nothing loudly. It only preserves signs. But those signs point toward a beginning in which humanity was not merely dust waiting to be instructed. It was dust with something luminous hidden inside it. The gods may have made humans from clay and blood for labor, order, and cosmic service. But if the blood was divine, then the clay could remember the heavens. Before we go there, stay one moment longer in the temple chamber. The walls are not smooth. Mud brick holds the marks of hands. Reed impressions. Tiny cracks where heat and time have opened the surface. Dust rests in the corner. A little oil lamp burns with a wavering point of gold. The air smells of river clay, smoke, and old grain. A person stands alone in the chamber, not praying loudly, not performing for a crowd, only waiting. The waiting is the important part. A later world needs interpreters, priests, omens, formulas, ritual calendars, signs in the liver, patterns in the stars. But this earlier image is different. The human listens as if the world itself is still porous, as if heaven has not yet withdrawn behind sealed doors, as if a voice might arrive through the wall, through the water beneath the floor, through the bones of the listener. You know that feeling when a room becomes so quiet that even your own breath seems too large. That is how I imagine it. Not dramatic, not theatrical. A hush so deep that attention becomes almost a sense of touch. If those early humans possessed direct perception, then knowledge was not only taught, it was received. A field was not merely a field, but a pattern of water, season, root, seed, and hidden timing. A metal was not merely stone changed by fire, but a substance with an inner mood, an inner readiness. A star was not only light, but a marker in a great turning mechanism above the world. This is why the gods feared the traits. In the source telling, a human who only obeys can be managed. A human who perceives can compare. A human who compares can ask whether the divine order is just. The first danger is not rebellion. The first danger is understanding. So the old story begins with a gift that is also a problem. Divine blood gives life, but it also gives kinship. The gods can call humanity servant, worker, clay-born, earth-born. Yet something inside the human body answers from the other side of the boundary. Something says, not only clay, that quiet phrase will follow us. Through the king lists, through the flood, through Adapa, through the recalled Apkallu, through the closing of the inner ear, through the hidden schools and the watchers who choose to teach what heaven has forbidden. For now, one tablet sleeps under dust. One chamber hums. One human listens. And the gods, somewhere beyond the visible wall, begin to wonder how much of themselves they have placed into the beings below. The fire shifts beside us. A coal folds inward. Outside the room, night waits with the patience of old ruins. We have only touched the first layer. The tablet has shown us divine blood, direct sight, temple resonance, and the first suspicion that human beings were once closer to the gods than later systems allowed. Now the story must move into deep time, to the impossible reigns carved into the Sumerian king list, to rulers who supposedly lasted tens of thousands of years, and to the flood line, after which the years begin to shrink like a memory being slowly taken away. The years begin as if time itself had not yet learned to be small. On another clay object, not a flat tablet this time, but a prism with 4 written sides. The Sumerian king list preserves a sequence of rulers whose reigns seem almost impossible to say aloud without feeling the room grow older. The object is known today as the Weld-Blundell prism. It stands like a little tower of baked memory, covered with columns of wedge-shaped signs, each one pressed into clay by a scribe who believed the line of kings mattered enough to survive him. The first sentence is already a descent from heaven to earth. When kingship descended from heaven, kingship was an Eridu. Kingship did not rise from a village argument. It did not begin with a strong man standing on a wall and declaring himself everyone problem. It descended. In the Sumerian imagination, rule came down from above and settled first in Eridu, an ancient city near the marshes, sacred to Enki, old enough to feel like a place where history begins with wet clay still on its feet. Then the list names kings. Alulim of Eridu is said to have ruled for 28,800 years. His successor, Alangar, is said to have ruled for 36,000 years. Let those numbers pass slowly through the dark. 28,800 years. 36,000 years. These are not reigns in the ordinary human sense. They are longer than dynasties, longer than languages, longer than most memories can bear. A modern historian will usually treat them as mythic numbers, symbolic exaggerations, sacred mathematics, perhaps a way of giving early kings a scale appropriate to the world before the flood. that caution is wise. Yet the source asks why those numbers appear with such confidence. It points out that the cities named in the list are not imaginary. Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sipar, Shuruppak. These names belong to actual landscapes, actual mounds, actual layers under southern Mesopotamian dust. The king list ties impossible time to real geography. That is what makes it unsettling. A fantasy can float anywhere. This one plants its feet in known cities. The source also insists that Sumerian and Babylonian scribes were mathematically sophisticated. They could record astronomical cycles. They understood calculation systems with a precision that still shapes our hour and our circle. They were not people casually throwing numbers around because clay was cheap and nobody was checking. Clay was work. Signs required effort. Numbers had weight. Still, serious scholarship remains careful. Long reigns do not prove long lives. Ancient royal lists often use time symbolically to express sacred authority, antiquity, or a break between myth and history. But in the source narrative, these numbers become a memory of antediluvian humanity, the people before the flood, whose lifespans had not yet been reduced. Then comes the floodline. After the flood swept over, kingship descends again, but the reigns begin to shrink. Not immediately into ordinary years, but downward, from tens of thousands to thousands, to hundreds, and finally toward the smaller scale of historical life. This shrinking becomes one of the source's strongest images. Human time being cut down, the great old years narrowing, the long breath of early humanity shortened into the quick breath we know now. Picture a scribe reading the list by lamplight. His finger moves from one column to the next. Long reigns before the flood. Shorter reigns after. The line between them is not only water, it is loss. The Epic of Gilgamesh gives another figure to this old memory. Utnapishtim. He is the flood survivor, the one granted a form of immortal life after the catastrophe. When Gilgamesh finds him, he is not simply an old man with a good story. He is a living remainder of an earlier human condition. He knows what Gilgamesh does not know. He carries a memory that the hero, despite his strength and semi-divine nature, cannot easily grasp. The source presents Utnapishtim as evidence of a world where ordinary humans once had access to divine knowledge more directly. In the tale, Gilgamesh seeks immortality and fails. Utnapishtim already stands on the far side of the loss, like a witness left on shore after the floodwaters have taken the bridge away. The old world was not merely longer lived. It was differently known. Here the story turns toward the me. The word is small, but the idea is vast. In Sumerian tradition, the me were divine powers, ordinances, functions, and cultural capacities. They governed the structures of civilization, kingship, priesthood, truth, battle, metalworking, woodworking, writing, music, beer brewing, desire, law, crafts, social roles, sacred offices, The list is wide and strangely practical, which is very Sumerian. The divine order includes both kingship and beer. One may decide for oneself which civilization valued more wisely. The me are not abstract moral slogans. They are working powers. To possess a me means more than knowing the name of a craft. It means having the authority, technique, and cosmic permission to make that function operate. Metalworking is not just striking ore with fire. It is knowing the right relation between substance, heat, timing, and divine order. Kingship is not only wearing a crown, it is holding the sanctioned structure that lets rule exist. In the myths of Inanna and Enki, Enki possesses the me in his temple at Eridu. Inanna visits, and through charm, cunning, feasting, and the kind of divine hospitality that perhaps should have involved fewer cups, she obtains them and carries them to Uruk. Enki later tries to recover them, but Inanna brings them into her city. The source reads this as more than a playful divine theft. It sees the myth as a memory of the movement of divine capacities into human civilization. The me are stored, transferred, guarded, and contested. The source claims that humans originally had direct access to these powers without needing divine intermediaries, and that later priestly systems emerged after such access was restricted. Again, we hold that claim with caution, but the story shape is clear. Knowledge was once near. Then it became controlled. Think of Eridu, the old city of Enki, by the waters. The temple foundations there go back to very early periods, and the site was rebuilt again and again, each layer resting on the one beneath, like memory stacked in mud brick. The source describes storage chambers and preservation spaces for tablets, suggesting that this was not merely a place of worship, but a place where knowledge itself was housed. A temple can be many things at once. A home for a god, a school, a warehouse, a court, a library, a machine for turning divine authority into human order. In the source telling, Eridu becomes the great treasury of the me, the place where divine knowledge and human capability meet. Imagine a dim chamber with shelves of tablets, sealed jars, careful lists, the smell of damp clay and old reeds, a teacher with a stylus, a student watching the stars through a doorway, not learning only by copying, but by perceiving. This links to another claim in the source, that antediluvian education taught direct perception of cosmic principles. Later, scribal schools focused on memorizing signs and copying older tablets. But earlier institutions, the source says, trained humans to read the tablets of heaven directly, to derive knowledge from celestial mechanics and natural patterns. The phrase tablets of heaven is beautiful. It imagines the sky as a written surface, stars as signs, planetary paths as lines of instruction, the night itself as an archive open to eyes that have not yet been dimmed. Babylonian astronomical texts preserve observations of great sophistication. The source claims that some calculations imply observational traditions spanning very long periods. Mainstream scholars may explain this through accumulated records, later calculation, or ideal schemes. But within the story we are shaping, the meaning is more intimate. Early humans could see patterns that later humans could only compute. Direct sight became mathematics. Living perception became procedure. A voice became a tablet. That pattern will repeat throughout the whole narrative. When the gift fades, the tool appears. When the inner eye closes, the chart is invented. When the divine voice becomes distant, the priest learns omens. The more humanity loses, the more it records. And perhaps that is why Mesopotamia feels so full of tablets. A civilization that once saw directly, in the source vision, begins writing because it is beginning to forget. Now the danger becomes clearer. A humanity that lives for millennia, reads heaven, possesses the me, hears the gods, and builds learning centers independent of divine supervision, is no small servant species. It is a rival in slow formation. It does not need to attack heaven with armies at first. It only needs to become self-directing. Cities begin to develop their own knowledge systems. Farmers understand cycles. Smiths understand metals. Builders understand stress and proportion. Astronomers understand celestial timing. Healers understand the body before symptoms speak. Lawmakers begin to settle disputes by human judgment. The old divine order remains above, but below it, another order is forming, made of clay tablets, skilled hands, and long-lived memory. You can almost feel the Anunnaki Council growing restless. The gods had intended humans for service. According to many Mesopotamian creation traditions, humans would maintain temples, provide offerings, support cosmic order. But a servant with divine traits is not a simple tool. A long-lived servant learns. A perceptive servant compares. A servant with access to the me might begin to create functions that heaven did not authorize. The source later says, some humans even tried to fashion their own me. That phrase is not yet the center of the story, but it casts a shadow backward. If the me are divine powers governing reality, then to make one is to cross a line. It is not only invention, it is imitation of divine authority. It is the earthborn saying, we can generate order too. No wonder the gods feared it. The fire beside us lowers slightly. The tablet glow in our imagination becomes amber and dim. A world before the flood has opened, not a world of moral innocence, but of expanded capacity. A world where time stretches, where knowledge is not yet locked behind priestly doors, where divine powers circulate through cities, where humans stand not as gods, but near enough that heaven begins to count the danger. The years on the prism are impossible, perhaps symbolic, perhaps something else. The source wants us to hear them as memory. The named cities make the memory harder to ignore. The flood line makes the loss visible. The me make the lost traits functional. Long life, direct knowledge, cosmic perception, divine ordinances. A human world growing too capable for comfort. And far above, or perhaps not far enough above, the gods begin to listen, not with kindness, but with alarm. The next sound in the story is the sound that Enlil cannot bear. Human noise, But the source asks us to hear that noise carefully, not as simple shouting in the streets, but as organized complaint, resistance, invention, legal speech, and the rising murmur of a species beginning to govern itself. The next sound is not a scream. It is a murmur that grows until even the gods can hear it. In the Atrahasis story, the world has continued for many generations after humans were created. Cities have spread. Fields have widened. Canals cut across the land like silver lines in mud. Houses gather near temples. Workshops glow in the evenings. Grain moves into storehouses. Scribes press numbers into clay. Children learn the names of gods before they fully understand hunger, work, or obedience. Humanity has multiplied. The text says that after 1,200 years, the land grew noisy. Enlil could not sleep. The noise of humanity disturbed him. At first, this sounds almost simple, as if the god of wind and command were merely a tired lord bothered by loud neighbors. But the source asks us to listen more carefully. The word behind the complaint can carry more than ordinary sound. It can suggest outcry, complaint, accusation, public disturbance, legal protest. Not only people talking too loudly in the night, though humans are certainly capable of that with very little encouragement. The sound may be the sound of an organized society pushing against divine management. The land bellowed like a bull. That image matters. A bull does not whisper. It announces itself. It fills space. It lowers its head and makes the ground feel the body behind the sound. If humanity is bellowing, then humanity is no longer merely carrying baskets and bringing offerings. It is becoming a force. Imagine an antediluvian city at night. The temple still rises at the center, but around it the human world has grown dense and confident. In one courtyard, people argue over water rights. In another, craftsmen test new tools. In a scribal room, students copy lists not only of divine ordinances, but of human contracts, debts, fields, dispute, and decisions. At the edge of the city, builders measure a wall that was not ordered by heaven. In a market, traders count goods from far regions. In a house, elders speak of laws that must serve people as well as gods. This is the noise Enlil hears. Not merely loud mouths, though there are surely a few of those too. Every civilization comes with at least one man who thinks the whole street needs his opinion before dawn. The deeper noise is independence. The source presents human growth as more than population. It becomes legal and intellectual pressure. People establish settlements outside strict divine oversight. They organize labor. They make agreements. They produce knowledge. They begin to govern themselves. The divine order still stands above them. But below it, another order is forming, one made of human memory, human planning, and human ambition. To Enlil, this is not progress. It is threat. The gods created humans to serve cosmic order. In many Mesopotamian creation stories, humans relieve divine labor, maintain temples, provide offerings, and support the rhythm of the world. But now the servants have become numerous enough to generate their own rhythm. They are not only feeding the gods, they are feeding cities. They are not only obeying rituals, they are writing procedures. They are not only receiving the me. According to the source, some humans may be trying to fashion their own. That claim is bold. It should be held carefully. The me are divine powers and ordinances, the structures that allow civilization to function. If humans began creating their own me, it would mean they were attempting to generate new cosmic functions without divine permission. Not only inventing a tool, but authorizing reality. Not merely copying the gods, but competing with them. Whether we read this literally, symbolically, or as the source's speculative interpretation, the narrative force is clear. Humanity is becoming difficult to manage. The divine council notices Enlil is disturbed enough to act. His first response is not the flood. Not yet. Before the great water comes a sequence of diminishments. The source treats these as targeted interventions meant to reduce humanity without immediately erasing it. The first is plague, sent through Namtar. Namtar is associated with fate and deathly decree. Illness moves through the human population like a quiet hand over lamps. Streets become still. Workshops close earlier. Families whisper over sleeping mats. Breath itself becomes watched. Yet humanity adapts. According to the Atrahasis pattern, Ea, or Enki, gives counsel. Worship is redirected. The plague is relieved. The first intervention weakens, but does not end the human world. So Enlil tries again. Drought and famine. This is not a sudden image of violence, but something slower and therefore more frightening. The fields do not answer. Irrigation channels shrink. River mud cracks. Seed waits under dust. Farmers stand at the edge of their land and try to read the sky, but the sky gives nothing. A child asks when bread will come, and the room grows quiet. The source interprets famine as the withdrawal of agricultural divine knowledge. It is not only that rain stops or crops fail. It is that humans lose the subtle understanding that once guided cultivation, the timing of water, the language of soil, the hidden needs of seed and root, the sensing of plant life that earlier humans may have held through the me or through direct perception. A field that was once readable becomes mute. Think of the horror of that. The farmer still has hands. The canal still has banks. The seed still exists. But the living pattern has become unclear. The old knowing is gone or weakened. The person who once saw when to plant now guesses. The person who once felt the soil need now waits helplessly for signs. This is how diminishment works in the source. Not by taking away all knowledge at once, by making what was once direct become uncertain. The people suffer. They turn again toward Ea. Again, counsel is given. The pressure eases. Humanity survives. But each intervention leaves a memory of dependence. A lesson. The gods can touch breath. The gods can touch food. The gods can touch knowledge at its root. Then comes something more abstract and more terrible. The Great Binding. The source describes Enlil and Ninlil sealing the gates of understanding and blocking the wells of wisdom. This may not be a mainstream translation in the ordinary way. It belongs to the source's interpretive framework. But as a story image, it is powerful. Imagine wisdom as water. Not water in a cup, but water below the earth. Deep, cool, necessary. Earlier, humans could draw from it. They could lower the vessel and bring up understanding. They could hear, see, recognize, and act. Then the wells are sealed. Stones are fitted over them. Clay is packed around the edges. The rope hangs useless. The gates of understanding close. Un by un. No thunder. No spectacle. Just a narrowing inside the human mind. The world remains visible, but less transparent. The stars remain in the sky, but they no longer speak as plainly. The plants remain in the field, but their inner condition is hidden. Metal still glows in the furnace, but the smith must learn by trial and error. Voices in temple chambers fall silent or become faint enough that someone else must interpret them. The source points to archaeological patterns as possible echoes of such decline. Abandoned advanced projects, simplified artistic motifs, shifts in temple function, changes in the way knowledge is stored and transmitted. These claims are debated, and they must remain debated. Archaeology rarely hands us a note that says, "Divine wisdom was sealed here." It gives us layers, breakages, changes, patterns, and silence. But within the narrative, the meaning is clear. The gods are not merely punishing bodies. They are altering capacity. This is a darker form of control. A prison wall is obvious. A shorter life is visible. But reduced perception can become invisible to the one who suffers it. A person born after the loss may think the dimmer world is normal. The child who never had God's sight does not know what color has disappeared. The farmer who never heard the plant does not know the field once spoke. The diminished world becomes ordinary. That may be the saddest part. If a people loses a gift slowly enough, its grandchildren may call the absence nature. After the Great Binding, humanity still survives. That is important. The gods do not wish to lose all workers, all offerings, all temple service. The tension remains. Humans are necessary, but dangerous. Weakening them is better than erasing them, at least for a while. Enlil is not satisfied. The noise continues. Perhaps quieter, perhaps rougher, perhaps more desperate, but still present. Humans reproduce. Cities continue. Knowledge adapts. If direct perception is dimmed, records multiply. If the wells of wisdom are sealed, people dig smaller wells of technique. If divine speech fades, humans build more elaborate ritual systems to coax meaning from what remains. A wounded species becomes inventive. This is one of the strongest emotional currents in the source. Humanity is diminished, but not passive. Every loss produces a substitute. Every sealed gate leads to a tool. Every closed sense produces a method. The gods reduce, and humans compensate. Plague teaches dependence. Famine teaches vulnerability. Binding teaches the pain of not knowing. And still, people gather at night in courtyards, under dim oil lamps, whispering about what was taken. Perhaps an elder remembers that his grandfather knew the river signs more clearly. Perhaps a builder says the old walls were made by measurements no one now understands. Perhaps a priest admits, very softly, that the god no longer speaks as directly as before. The source imagines antediluvian humanity at this edge, not yet destroyed, not yet fully reset, but watched, weakened, reduced in stages. The divine council may believe it is restoring order. From their side, perhaps, they are preventing chaos. A human race with divine blood, long life, direct knowledge, and self-made me might tear the cosmic hierarchy apart. Enlil hears the bellowing land and hears rebellion before it fully ripens. But from below, it feels different. It feels like theft. The breath is attacked. The fields are starved. The wells of wisdom are sealed. The inner doors close. Human beings remain alive, but less than they were. The tragedy is quiet because no one born after the closing knows the full measure of the loss. A temple chamber that once rang with direct presence becomes a room with interesting acoustics. A star pattern that once opened, knowledge becomes a chart to memorize. A field once read like a face becomes soil to test with uncertain hands. The fire beside us bends and steadies. In the dim room, the clay tablet seems to hold its breath. It has carried the idea of divine blood. It has carried impossible years. Now it carries the first narrowing, the first interventions by gods who fear their own creation. Humanity is not yet broken, but it has been warned. And somewhere in the next layer of myth, one man will stand before the high god Anu with the bread and water of life in front of him, and because of a warning from the God who made him wise, he will refuse the very thing that might have restored humanity to the rank it almost reached. One man stands before heaven with empty hands. His name is Adapa. He is not a king in the ordinary heroic sense, not a conqueror with walls behind him and armies at his call. He is a Zag, a priestly figure of Eridu, associated with Ea, the god of wisdom and deep waters. In the old tale, Adapa has been given vast understanding, but not eternal life. That distinction matters. He is wise enough to touch the borders of the divine, yet mortal enough to lose everything by trusting the wrong instruction. Adapa begins by the water. Picture him in a reed boat. Low on the surface, the morning still pale around him. The sea or broad water breathes under the hull. Reeds shift near the bank. The air smells of salt, fish, vet rope, and sun warming the edge of the world. Adapa goes out to fish for the temple of Ea. His work is ritual and practical at once. Food for the divine household. Service to the god. A daily act wrapped in sacred duty. Then the south wind rises. It does not come as a polite breeze. It strikes the boat, tips the world, throws Adapa into the water, or threatens to overturn him. The south wind in Mesopotamia could be harsh, hot, disruptive, a force that made the body feel the climate as judgment. In the myth, Adapa curses it or speaks against it with such power that he breaks its wing. The south wind stops blowing for 7 days. That is no ordinary act. A human has injured a cosmic force. Think of the silence in heaven after such a thing. The winds are not simply weather. They are part of the functioning of the world. To break the wing of the south wind is to interrupt a system older than human hands. The gods notice. Anu, the high god of heaven, asks why the south wind has not blown. The answer comes back. Adapa broke its wing. Now Adapa must be summoned to heaven. This is the key moment. Amurtal, though not an ordinary mortal, is called into the court of Anu. The source sees this as evidence of what early humans once were. Beings close enough to divine capacity that they could affect cosmic mechanisms directly. Adapa is not merely clever. He is dangerous. He can act on the structure of reality. Ea prepares him. Ea tells Adapa how to behave in heaven. He instructs him to wear mourning clothes, to win the sympathy of Tammuz and Gazida at the gate, to answer carefully, and most importantly, not to eat the bread or drink the water offered to him. Ea says they will be bread of death and water of death. Adapa obeys, and here the tragedy begins to close around him. Imagine the ascent. Not loud, not full of shining trumpets. A quieter, more frightening elevation. The mortal leaves the world of mud brick, reeds, river smell, temple kitchen smoke, and human breath. He enters the court above. The stone or cloud beneath his feet is cold. The light is too clear. Gods look at him with an interest that is not entirely kind. Tammuz and Gazida see him in mourning and ask why he is dressed so. He answers as Ea taught him, honoring them. They speak well of him before Anu. The heavenly court softens. Anu hears that Adapa is wise, that he has honored the gate deities, that he acted with unusual power. Then Anu decides to offer him what Ea told him not to take. The bread of life, the water of life. Simple things. Bread and water. That is what makes the scene so cruelly quiet. Immortality does not arrive as a sword of lightning or a crown of stars. It arrives as food and drink placed before a hungry human. A piece of bread, a cup of water, the most basic gifts of survival, now holding the difference between mortal limitation and divine continuity. Adapa refuses. He refuses because he trusts Ea. He refuses because he was told the food would kill him. He refuses, and the door closes. Anu is surprised. He asks why Adapa did not eat or drink. The answer reveals the manipulation. He warned him. The bread was not death. The water was not death. They were life. Adapa has lost the chance to become immortal. This myth can be read in several ways. Some scholars see it as a tale about human limitation, about the danger of wisdom without immortality, about the ambiguous protection of Ea, who saves Adapa from punishment but also prevents him from becoming like the gods. Others read it as a theological explanation for why humans possess knowledge but still die. The source takes the darker path. It treats EA warning as sabotage, not simple kindness, not misunderstanding, a calculated prevention of human ascent. Adapa, the near-divine human, is brought to the threshold of immortality, and his own divine patron ensures he does not cross it. That interpretation makes the story ache. Ea is often portrayed as humanity's helper. He protects Atrahasis before the flood. He counsels humans against divine destruction. He is the deep-water god of wisdom. Yet here, his help is double-edged. He preserves Adapa from the immediate risk of heaven, perhaps, but also keeps immortality out of human hands. Maybe Ea feared what Anu intended. Maybe he believed immortality would provoke worse punishment. Maybe he wanted to keep humanity dependent. Maybe he loved humans, but not enough to let them become equal. The myth does not settle the motive neatly, and that uncertainty is part of its power. Adapa returns to Earth, still wise, still mortal. He has seen heaven and refused life. Picture the walk back, if walking is the right word for a return from divine court. He comes down with the same body, the same breath, the same limit. The water of life remains untasted. The bread of life remains uneaten. The human future remains shortened. The source connects this failure to the broader diminishment after the flood. Humanity survives, but not whole. Long life is gone. Direct divine food is withheld. The chance to stabilize divine attributes in the human line is lost. Adapa becomes a symbol of the great near miss. A door almost opened. A hand almost reached. A human almost ate. Then obedience became the mechanism of loss. That is the dark genius of the story. Adapa is not punished because he rebelled. He is diminished because he obeyed the warning of the God who taught him. There is a quiet lesson there, and it is not an easy one. Knowledge from a divine source may not always serve the receiver. Instructions can protect and limit at the same time. A teacher can preserve a student while keeping the final secret hidden. This leads back to Utnapishtim. The flood survivor in the Gilgamesh epic stands as a rare exception. Someone granted life beyond ordinary humanity. He and his wife are set apart, placed at a distance, removed from the normal human world. Gilgamesh travels far to find him, because Utnapishtim possesses what later humans have lost: knowledge of the flood, memory of divine decisions, and a form of immortality. But even there, the gift is not shared widely. Utnapishtim tests Gilgamesh. Can he stay awake? Gilgamesh fails. Sleep overcomes him. Later he gains the plant of rejuvenation, only to lose it to the serpent while he bathes. Again, the pattern repeats. The human comes close. The human sees the possibility. The human loses the gift. Bread refused. Sleep failed. Plant stolen. Immortality withdraws by many doors. The source presents this as a coordinated pattern. Humans who might recover divine status are blocked, not always by force, sometimes by warning, sometimes by sleep, sometimes by trickery, sometimes by a serpent at the water edge. The outcome is the same. Mortality remains. Post-flood humanity becomes smaller in time. The king list shows shrinking reigns. Medical and ritual records, according to the source, preserve hints of reduced perception, weakened body, diminished healing, and the loss of God's sight. These claims are not mainstream certainties. They are interpretations layered over fragmentary materials. But they belong to the source narrative, and the emotional arc is clear. Human beings once carried more. After the flood, they carry less. The antediluvian survivors may preserve selected bloodlines, selected knowledge, selected fragments of the older capacities. But the full inheritance is no longer general. It becomes rare, hidden, guarded, or broken into specialist roles. The priest remembers a formula. The astronomer studies signs. The healer uses procedures. The king claims divine favor. But the ordinary human no longer stands in the temple chamber hearing directly. The loss has become social structure. Adapa is the hinge. He stands between worlds, human and divine, wise and mortal, chosen and limited. He is close enough to break the wind, close enough to stand before Anu, close enough to be offered life. But he returns without it. Think again of the bread. It would have looked so ordinary in the court of heaven, perhaps fine, perhaps radiant, perhaps plain. Bread is humble. Bread is daily. It belongs to kitchens, bowls, hands, and hunger. Water belongs to thirst. These are the first needs of any body. The gods offer them, and in them hide the very thing humanity lacks. A person can lose a destiny by refusing a meal. That is why the scene stays with me. It is not dramatic in the noisy way. It is a quiet disaster. No battle. No flood. No walls falling. Only a man in heaven saying no to life because a trusted God told him to. You know that feeling when you realize too late that the safe choice was also the closed door. That is Adapa. The tale does not make him foolish. It makes him obedient, cautious, loyal to Ea, and therefore tragic. His wisdom cannot save him, because the one who gave wisdom has also shaped the limits around it. After Adapa, the question changes. If humans lost immortality through divine manipulation, how did they ever gain knowledge in the first place? Who taught them to read heaven, work metal, grow crops, build cities, organize societies, heal bodies, and understand the laws beneath visible things? The source answers with the Apkallu, the seven sages, fish-garmented teachers from before the flood. They came from the waters, bearing arts and sciences, and for a time, humanity learned directly from beings who still remembered the deeper order. But the gods were watching those lessons too. A final image before we leave Adapa. The heavenly table is cleared. The bread of life is removed. The water of life is taken away. Adapa descends, still wise, still mortal, carrying within him the terrible knowledge that he stood before the gift and did not receive it. Below, the rivers continue moving through Sumer. At Eridu, the deep-water god remains in his temple. Somewhere, in the schools of the antediluvian world, the teachers are still speaking, but not for long. The teachers came from the water. That is how the memory feels when you let it slow down. Not from a palace, not from a mountain, not from a room of kings arguing over seals and grain. From the edge of the sea, where the morning light lies flat on the Persian Gulf and the reeds stand wet and whispering. The first of them is often called Oannes in the later account of Berossus. In older Mesopotamian tradition, the group belongs to the Apkallu, the seven sages, beings linked to wisdom, craft, and the world before the flood. They are sometimes imagined wearing fish garments, half of sea and half of instruction, their forms strange enough to make a crowd fall silent before a single lesson begins. Imagine that dawn. The water is gray before sunrise. Fishermen stand near their boats. Children hold close to the knees of adults. Smoke rises from low houses near the marsh. Then something moves beyond the reeds. A shape rises, dripping, not quite animal, not quite human, wrapped in the skin or form of a fish. The figure steps from the water with the patience of someone who has crossed a boundary many times before. No one speaks at first. The water falls from the fish garment in thin streams. The mud accepts each step. The air smells of salt, river clay, reeds, and the first smoke of cooking fires. The teacher lifts a hand, and the people do not run. Perhaps fear has made them still. Perhaps recognition has. In stories like this, the difference is not always easy to name. Oannes teaches. According to Berossus, he teaches letters, science, arts, laws, geometry, agriculture, city building, and the principles by which civilized life can operate. He does not merely give a tool. He gives structure. He teaches humans how to move from survival toward order. This is where the source places the lost greatness of antediluvian humanity. The Apkallu were not merely clever visitors in a myth. They were the instructors of a humanity that still had the capacity to receive direct knowledge. They taught because humans could understand. They revealed because the minds before the flood were not yet sealed in the later way. The first sage, Oannes, carries the broad principles, cosmic order, or divine law, the correct relations between heaven, earth, water, city, and human action. The teaching is not delivered as a lecture with a bored student trying not to sleep, though we may be sure some ancient student managed that too. It arrives as a way of seeing. A line drawn in clay becomes more than a line. A number becomes rhythm. A star becomes a sign. A canal becomes a conversation between earth and water. The source then names specialized domains among the seven sages. Yuanduga teaches metallurgy and materials. Enmeduga teaches agriculture and biological knowledge. And Megalama teaches architecture and engineering. Enmebeluga teaches strategy and social organization. Anenlilda teaches art, culture, and the ordered beauty of human expression. Utuabzu coordinates and integrates the systems, the one who makes the parts speak to one another. These names come to us through later tradition and scholarly reconstruction, and the details are not always simple. Still, the source uses them to build a powerful image. Knowledge was once whole, not divided into little boxes guarded by separate experts, but woven. The smith understood fire. The farmer understood life. The builder understood stone. The astronomer understood time. The healer understood the body. The priest understood the bridge between human act and divine pattern. The artist understood form as more than decoration. The strategist understood society as a living arrangement, not only a battlefield. The integrated mind could hold many of these together. Picture a teaching chamber in Eridu. The walls are thick. The floor is packed clay. A lamp burns low near a shelf of damp tablets. Outside, water moves through reeds, and birds call in the pale air. Inside, a sage stands before students who are not merely children, but long-lived learners. People whose senses have not yet been dimmed. People who can hear resonance in stone and read small changes in flame. The teacher presses a sign into clay. The students do not only memorize it. They feel how the sign belongs to number, sound, measure, star, field, and ritual. Knowledge is not scattered. It is alive. Honestly, that may be the thing we have lost most completely, even beyond the source claims. The feeling that wisdom should connect instead of merely accumulate. Modern people can know many facts and still fail to hear how they speak to one another. The Apkaru, in this telling, taught connection. Wanduga stands near a furnace. Ore lies on the floor in dull pieces. Charcoal glows. A bellows breathes. The metal does not simply melt because heat is applied. It changes according to temperament, timing, color, smell, and the hidden readiness of the material. The source says early humans had a fireside, a direct sense of what metal needed. Later smiths would learn by trial, error, and tradition. Before the loss, they could see into the fire. The teacher shows the exact moment. Not too early, not too late. The metal glows, and the student understands. And Megalama teaches architecture. A stone is not mute. A wall is not dead. Load, pressure, angle, hollow, space, sound, proportion, direction of sun, movement of wind, memory of water. All of these belong to building. The source later claims that some ancient structures seem to preserve knowledge for modern observers cannot easily explain, though such claims must be handled with caution. Still, in the story, the lesson is tactile and quiet. A hand rests on a stone. A builder learns where it wants to bear weight. En Mebuluga teaches society. This may be the most dangerous knowledge of all. Tools can be controlled. Fields can be managed. But a society that understands itself becomes difficult to rule from above. Strategy is not only war. It is coordination. It is law. It is knowing how people move together, how complaint becomes assembly, how memory becomes institution. how a city can become more than a cluster of houses. The gods would watch that lesson carefully. Utubzu gathers the systems: astronomy, agriculture, metal, city, song, healing, governance, all joined in the source telling. This integration allowed early humans to act with a kind of unified intelligence. Not magic in the cheap sense, but a perception of relation. The world was a web, and the Apkallu taught humans to feel the strands. The cities grew: Eridu, Uruk, Shirupak, Sipper, other names under a hot sky. Learning centers formed around temples and water. Students copied, watched, listened, practiced. If the source is right, they did not merely receive instruction from distant gods through ritual. They learned directly from emissaries of divine wisdom. But the growth of knowledge has consequences. The more humans learned, the less they needed constant direction. The more they understood fire, seed, stone, number, healing, and social order, the more human civilization could operate on its own. The teachers had done their work too well. There is an old pattern here. Power wants useful servants. Power fears educated ones. The gods begin to see the danger. If humans have long lives, divine blood, access to the me, direct perception, and teachers from the deep, then the line between earthborn and divine becomes thinner. Not erased, but thin enough to trouble heaven. So the teachers are recalled. This is one of the saddest images in the source. The 7 Apkallu are called back before the flood. Direct instruction ends. Barriers are established against future teaching. The classrooms do not collapse at once. The tablets remain. The benches remain. The tools remain. But the living presence of the teachers is gone. Imagine the morning after. A teaching chamber in Eridu, cool and empty. The floor still bears footprints from yesterday. A tablet lies unfinished, a sign half-copied and never corrected. Outside, the water moves as always, which is often the cruelest thing about loss. The reeds continue whispering. Birds continue calling. The sun rises as if nothing has been taken. A student waits. No teacher comes. The fish garments have returned to the deep. The silence after knowledge is different from ordinary silence. Ordinary silence can be peaceful. This silence has edges. It is the shape of an absence where instruction used to stand. Students still gather. Scribes still copy. Priests still speak. But something direct is gone. From this point on, knowledge begins to change form. What was once taught by presence becomes text. What was once perceived becomes formula. What was once whole becomes divided into offices, initiation, and guarded lineages. The source sees the recall of the Apkallu as a central step in the limitation of humanity. Before the flood, teachers moved openly between divine knowledge and human cities. After the recall, instruction becomes mediated, controlled, restricted. Later sages appear in different forms, sometimes as human scholars or ritual figures, but the original open transmission has ended. humanity is not left ignorant. That would be too simple. Humanity is left with fragments. Fragments are powerful, but they require reconstruction. They create priesthoods, schools, archives, and secrets. A complete system can be lived. A fragmented system must be guarded, interpreted, and often fought over. That is how knowledge becomes hierarchy. If only a few can read the old tablets, the few gain power. If only a bloodline can enter a chamber, the bloodline becomes sacred. If only priests know the ritual, the people become dependent. If only omens can reveal what was once directly seen, then omen readers stand between human need and divine response. This is the world forming after the Apkallu depart. The gods have not destroyed human knowledge. They have removed its living source. They have taken away direct teachers and left human beings to preserve whatever they can in clay, memory, and practice. A low wind moves through the reeds. In our firelit room, the candle trembles. Think of Oanes once more, rising from the water at dawn. Think of the crowd listening. Think of the first letters, the first measures, the first law, the first teaching of how reality might be read. Then think of the water closing again, teacher by teacher, until only the shore remains. The students wait. The tablets dry. The sea gives no answer. And somewhere beyond the visible sky, the gods begin to seal the knowledge more tightly, gathering cosmic authority around the tablet of destinies, while human beings below learn the first lesson of the diminished age. If the divine voice will not come directly, someone must build a system to interpret the silence. If the divine voice will not come directly, someone must build a system to interpret the silence. That is where the tablet of destinies begins to glow in the dark of the story. In Mesopotamian myth, the tablet of destinies is not a school tablet. It is not a list of grain or a student exercise with a bored teacher correcting signs in the margin. It is the symbol of cosmic authority itself, the right to decree what will happen, the power to fix order, destiny, and command. Whoever holds it does not merely know the world. He can speak to the structure beneath the world. The source treats the tablet of destinies as the great image of restricted knowledge. Before the diminishment, antediluvian humans allegedly had access to cosmic principles more directly. They could read the patterns of heaven. They could foresee changes in water, season, disease, and fate. Utnapishtim, warned before the flood, becomes one example of this older capacity. He knows what is coming because the old channel has not completely closed around him. After the flood, that knowledge is not erased entirely. It is locked. Imagine a tablet held in a high divine chamber, its surface not made of ordinary clay, but of authority. The signs upon it are not simple words. They are futures, decrees, boundaries, the pattern of days, the permitted movement of things. It lies under guard, not because the gods love secrecy for its own sake, but because knowledge has become dangerous in human hands. A servant who can see fate is no longer only a servant. A human who can anticipate disaster can evade punishment. A city that can read heaven can act without waiting for a priest. So, the knowledge must pass through filters. This is the world after the flood in the source telling. Human access to divine information is no longer universal or direct. It becomes mediated by temple, priesthood, bloodline, initiation, purification, divination, and controlled archive. The channel does not vanish. It narrows. Think of a river diverted into a clay pipe. The water still moves, but someone controls the pipe. The source points toward astronomical traditions, such as the Venus tablet of Amisaduqa, as evidence that Mesopotamians preserved sophisticated predictive systems. Mainstream scholars would describe such tablets in relation to observation, calculation, omen literature, and later transmission. The source reads them more dramatically, as fragments of a once direct celestial knowledge system that had become textual after perception was dimmed. The distinction matters. One reading says humans learned by watching the sky for generations. The other says humans once saw the sky differently, then built astronomy to replace the sight they lost. For our story, we hold both possibilities quietly. The tablet remains real. The interpretation remains debated. The emotional truth is that the heavens became something to decode. Post-flood temples begin to change in the source narrative. Old speaking chambers are sealed. Acoustics are altered. Access becomes restricted. Some rooms are entered only by purified specialists. Certain corridors are reserved for priestly lineages. The public no longer stands close to the divine voice. The god is approached through officials, and the officials become necessary. Again, we must be careful. Archaeology can show room changes, restricted spaces, rebuilding phases, and ritual design. It cannot always tell us why a wall was added or why a chamber was silenced. But the source reads these changes as part of a planned restriction of divine communication. Imagine an old chamber in Eridu. Once, perhaps, a person could stand in the hollow and hear the resonance like a low voice inside the bones. Now the passage is narrowed. A door is added. A screen blocks the line of sound. Thick plaster dulls the echo. The room still exists, but it no longer speaks as it did. A priest enters alone. The people wait outside. The divine message returns through his mouth. This is how mediation becomes authority. The source describes rituals that bound the sight of mortals and sealed the ears of the earthborn. These phrases belong to its interpretive frame, and we should not present them as simple, settled translations. But, as a mage, they are powerful. Sight-bound, ears sealed, not blind and deaf in the ordinary way, but cut off from the subtler channels of perception that once connected humans to divine systems. A person stands under the stars and sees only stars. A person enters the temple and hears only stone. A person dreams and wakes with fragments instead of clear instruction. So the priest becomes interpreter. He studies oil on water. He reads smoke. He watches the flight of birds. He examines the liver of a sacrificed animal. He charts Venus. He records eclipses. He notes strange births, thunder without rain, marks on sheep, shapes in clouds, patterns in flame. The world is full of signs because the old voice has become indirect. The diviner does not merely observe. He translates. An oil bowl sits in a dark room. A lamp flickers near it. The surface of the water is still. A drop of oil is placed carefully. It spreads, divides, curls into shapes that are compared with old omen lists. If the oil moves this way, perhaps the king is safe. If it breaks that way, perhaps danger comes from the west. Every curve becomes a question. A liver is held under lamplight. Its lobes and marks are compared to clay models and tablets. The liver becomes a map, a soft and perishable country through which the gods might speak. To modern ears, it may seem strange, but remember the deeper loss. If direct perception is gone, the body of the world must be searched for hints. Smoke rises from an offering. Does it climb straight? Does it bend? Does it thicken? Does it carry the scent properly? Does the flame accept the fat? Does the god seem satisfied? A priest learns to notice what ordinary people cannot, or perhaps what ordinary people have been taught not to see. That is the institutional world that grows after restriction. Temples no longer merely host divine presence. They manage access to it. Archives multiply. Omen series become vast. Ritual handbooks grow detailed. Purification rules separate the unprepared from the holy space. Knowledge is written, stored, coded, and transmitted through specialists. The older direct channel becomes a system of signs. Here, the source makes a darker claim. It says that the restriction of knowledge was not accidental development, but policy. The gods decided that ordinary humans should no longer access cosmic principles. Prophecy, healing, and divine communication directly. Humans would still function. They would still work, worship, and build cities. But they would require intermediaries. This is control by dependency. A person who needs a priest to hear the god is less dangerous than a person who hears directly. A farmer who needs omen experts to choose timing is less dangerous than a farmer who reads life in the field. A king who needs celestial authorization is easier to guide than a king who understands the sky himself. The source also claims temple access became tied to bloodlines. Certain families preserved fragments of pre-flood abilities. Certain priestly groups guarded the old systems. Initiation replaced common inheritance. Knowledge that once belonged broadly to the divine-blooded human condition became rare, managed, and wrapped in ritual language. Whether literal or symbolic, the pattern is familiar. When knowledge becomes restricted, institutions form around it. People compete for entry. Status grows around secrecy. A hidden room becomes more powerful than an open field. In one imagined temple, a novice waits outside a corridor. He has washed. He has fasted. He has spoken the required names. He has perhaps been born from the correct family, or accepted by the correct teacher. A door opens. Inside is not a god standing visibly in light. Inside are tablets, bowls, signs, and instructions. The sacred has become technical. That may be the most Sumerian form of loss. Even deprivation is organized. The people outside still need answers. Will the crops survive? Will the child recover? Will the king win? Will the flood come? Will the gods accept the offering? But the answer no longer arrives in the open. It drips through channels. The source calls this the filtered age. Knowledge dripping through guarded channels. Direct vision becomes omen science. Direct speech becomes divination. Direct healing becomes ritual medicine. Direct prophecy becomes astronomical record. Direct divine contact becomes priestly performance. And yet, as before, humanity adapts. If the heavens are closed, humans map them. If the voice is faint, humans build listening systems. If sight is bound, humans invent instruments of inference. If the tablet of destinies is locked away, humans create smaller tablets, thousands of them, each preserving one fragment, one observation, one rule, one omen, one way to survive in the dimmer world. This is tragic, but it is also deeply human. The gods reduce capacity, and humans respond with archive. A sealed sense becomes a science. A forbidden future becomes an omen list. A lost inner knowing becomes a classroom. The fire beside us moves softly. A log breaks and settles. The candle throws a wavering light over the table, as if the room itself were reading a sign. For a moment, the shadows look like rows of tablets on a shelf, each one waiting for a hand that knows how to read. In the source narrative, this is the moment when the great theft becomes social structure. Humanity has not only lost direct access to divine knowledge, it has reorganized around that loss. Priests rise. Temples become filters. Divination becomes necessary. Records become substitutes for lost perception. Mystery replaces memory. And somewhere beyond the ordinary world, the tablet of destinies remains under divine control. The symbol of knowledge humans once approached and now must circle from a distance. But the loss is not only in the temple. It enters the body. The next stage of the source is more intimate and more painful. It claims that post-flood humanity was not only cut off from direct knowledge, but gradually reduced in height, strength, perception, healing, and inner contact. The sealed heavens became sealed senses. The silent temple became a silent nerve. The loss moved from the archive into the bones. The loss moved from the archive into the bones. That is the claim the source makes next, and it is the most intimate part of the story. It is one thing to say that temples were sealed, that priestly corridors grew narrow, that old knowledge was locked behind rites and offices. It is another to say that the human body itself was changed. The source describes post-flood medical archives and temple records that speak of diminished humans. We should keep caution near us here, like a small lamp in a dark room. These claims are debated. The texts are fragmentary. Ancient measures and poetic descriptions can be difficult to separate from ritual language, but the narrative spine is clear. Humanity was not only denied the bread of life, not only deprived of direct teachers, not only forced to learn through omens and priests. Humanity became physically and perceptually less than it once had been. The old baseline, the source says, was 7 cubits and 3 palms. A body taller, denser, stronger, with greater organs, deeper breath, clearer senses, and a kind of internal brightness that later generations remembered only in myths of heroes and kings. After the flood, the measurements shrink, bone density weakens, stature declines, strength becomes more ordinary. Endurance fade. The body that once carried divine blood now carries a quieter echo of it. Imagine a temple physician by lamplight. The room smells of oil, clay, dried herbs, and old linen. A clay tablet lies beside a measuring cord. A patient sits quietly, perhaps a young man from a family that remembers old stories of taller ancestors. The physician measures the arm, the leg, the chest. He presses fingers to the wrist. He listens to breath. He compares the body before him to older records kept in a temple archive. The signs do not match. The old measures are larger. The new body is smaller. No one in the room says it loudly. The silence says enough. The source names records such as the diminishment of the earthborn and the sealed senses. We cannot treat those titles as ordinary confirmed library labels without care. But within the story, they carry a terrible mood. They suggest that the reduction was remembered not as random decline, but as something done, something imposed, something sealed. First came the body, then the senses. The old humans, the source claims, had hidden lights available to them. God's sight, life sight, the ability to perceive subtle forces in living things, in stone, in metal, in plants, in bodies, in stars. Later, humanity looked at the same world and saw surfaces. A plant became only leaf and root. A stone became only stone. A sick body became only symptoms. A star became only a light. Think of that loss slowly. If you are born with ordinary sight, you do not grieve colors you never saw. But if your ancestors once saw them, if the old poems describe them, if the temple walls preserve symbols of them, then ordinary sight becomes haunted by absence. A person stands in a field at dawn. The barley bends in a low wind. Dew holds on the blades. The soil is dark near the canal. Once, perhaps, a farmer could sense the hidden thirst of the crop, the disease before it showed, the right hour to water, the quiet conversation between root and earth. Now the farmer kneels, touche soil, and guesses. Guessing becomes agriculture. Another person stands before a furnace. The fire is bright, or darkens. Heat crawls through stone. Once, the smith may have seen the inner readiness of metal. The source says, a fireside that revealed when copper, tin, bronze, and later iron wanted to change. Now he watches color, listens to sound, learns by failures. Sparks fly. Smoke stings the eyes. A tool cracks because the timing was wrong. Trial becomes metallurgy. A healer places hands above a wound. The old fire of Ea does not rise as it once did. The source claims that early humans could transmit healing energy, accelerate repair, sense the body interior, and move vitality through touch. Later healers still work, but through herbs, bondage, chant, oils, and procedures. These are not useless. They save lives, but they replace something more direct, something warmer in the palms. Technique becomes medicine. This is the recurring pattern. Loss becomes method. Diminished sight becomes measurement. Diminished hearing becomes ritual listening. Diminished healing becomes pharmacy and spell. Diminished strength becomes tool-making. Diminished memory becomes writing. It is a sad pattern, but not a helpless one. Humanity adapts because it must. The gods may reduce the inner gift, but the human hand keeps inventing substitutes. The source points to Gilgamesh as a literary image of this decline. Gilgamesh is mighty, 2/3 divine in later description, but still unable to understand the world Utnapishtim comes from. He can build walls. He can fight. He can travel farther than ordinary men. Yet when he meets the flood survivor, he meets a remnant of an earlier condition. Utnapishtim carries knowledge and endurance that Gilgamesh cannot recover. Gilgamesh sleeps when he must stay awake. The plant of youth is lost to the serpent. The old human possibility retreats again. Enkidu gives another darker symbol. Wild, strong, close to animals and the natural world. He weakens after entering civilization. The source reads this as more than moral symbolism. It sees in Enkidu the conversion of a being with primal capacity into a diminished social human. He gains language, bread, beer, friendship, and the city, but loses a raw force that belonged to the world before walls. This reading is not the only reading. It may not be the safest, scholarly one, but as part of the source narrative, it is powerful. Civilization gives. Civilization also edits. The source continues through many lost skills. Military strength declines. Great weapons become ceremonial. Marching endurance decreases. Astronomy changes. The sky that was once read directly now requires long tables of Venus signs, eclipses, lunar omens, and planetary movements. Architecture change. The stone site is lost, and builders rely on rules, ros, lines, and repeated forms. Agriculture change. Plant site fades, and farmers use calendars, canal schedules, seed practice, and ritual days. Medicine changes. Life site fades, and diagnosis becomes symptom reading, herb work, dream interpretation, and incantation. Mathematics changes too. Number site becomes tables, lists, and formal calculation. Even textiles change, as weavers learn by touch and tradition what earlier hands may once have known directly. At each step, humanity becomes less naturally gifted and more technical. There is a strange dignity in that. If the source is right, we are a diminished species that refused to stop working. We lost sight, so we made diagrams. We lost long memory, so we made archives. We lost direct knowledge, so we made schools. We lost natural strength, so we made levers, pulleys, wheels, blades, ropes, laws, calendars, and stubborn little lists on clay. The gods may have sealed the inner gates. Humans made outer tools. Then comes the severing of divine communication. The source describes the closing of the inner ear, the quieting of guardian presences, the loss of direct contact with personal divine protectors. Before the flood, humans could supposedly hear the Agigi, receive instruction from divine beings, sense guidance in dreams, and know when a guardian stood near. Afterward, the voices receded. Imagine someone entering the old temple chamber. They remember stories of resonance, the low living hum, the sense that a god might answer from the wall. The chamber is still there. Dust lies in the corners. The clay brick still holds heat from the day. A lamp trembles in the niche. The person stands still and waits. Nothing. Only breath. Only the faint sound of oil in the lamp. Only the inner emptiness where a voice should have been. The source calls this kind of loss emptiness, sickness, and guardian sickness. Humans became anxious, hollow, disoriented. A person who once lived with unseen guidance now wakes alone inside the skull. Dreams fragment. Omens confuse. The protective presence once felt at the edge of the room no longer comes when called. So humans make substitutes. Amulets. Protective figurines. Doorway rituals. Household gods. Written charms. Priestly blessings. Night prayers. Lamps kept burning. The substitute does not prove the old presence was imaginary. In the source telling, it proves the opposite. People create replacements because something has gone missing. A mother ties a charm near a sleeping child. A farmer places a small protective object at the doorway. A traveler speaks a name before crossing open ground. A sick person sleeps beside a tablet marked with signs. The world has become lonelier. So the living fill it with crafted guardians. The psychological cost becomes part of civilization. Human beings build not only walls and fields, but systems of reassurance. They organize fear. They give loss a ritual container. They make ceremonies for voices that no longer arrive directly. This is where the darkness becomes very quiet. The source is not only saying humanity lost powers. It is saying humanity learned to live inside the absence of those powers. That is a different tragedy. A sudden theft burns. A long absence reshapes the house. Generations pass. Children are born with shorter lives, dimmer senses, ordinary strength. They learn the techniques their elders developed. They do not remember the direct gifts. They inherit the compensations and call them culture. This is both sorrow and survival. The sealed senses create scientists, scribes, priests, healers, smiths, builders, astronomers, farmers, mathematicians, soldiers, and artists. Perhaps all culture is. In this dark version of the story, the art of making tools for a loss the species barely remembers. The fire beside us sinks lower. The candlelight touches the edge of the imagined tablet. Dust floats in the air like tiny, unread signs. Somewhere in the old world, a sealed chamber waits with no voice inside it. Somewhere, a healer warms cold hands over a lamp. Somewhere, a smith watches metal and tries to guess. Somewhere, an astronomer writes the star because the star no longer speaks clearly to the mind. Humanity has been reduced, but not erased. It has been wounded, but not made still. And this is where the next question rises. If the gods diminished humanity, did every god agree? Did all the Anunnaki support the sealing of the senses, the shortening of years, the withdrawal of teachers, the silence of heaven? The source says no. It says there was conflict among the gods. It says Enki, Lord of deep waters and dangerous wisdom, preserved fragments, warned chosen humans, hid knowledge, and opposed the total reduction of the earthborn. So the story turns from loss to conspiracy. Not loud conspiracy, not the clumsy kind with dramatic shadows and too many candles, though ancient temples did enjoy candles. This is quieter. A whisper through water. A sealed chamber beneath Eridu. A teacher who does not fully obey the counsel. A god who knows that the clay still carries divine blood. The diminished humans sleep under a dimmer sky. But beneath them, in the deep water, something has not been surrendered. Beneath them, in the deep water, something has not been surrendered. The source says the divine council was not united. Enlil and the powers of restriction wanted the earthborn controlled, shortened, sealed, and kept within proper limits. But Enki, Lord of the Apsu, the deep fresh water below the earth, did not share that aim completely. He had helped shape humanity. He had warned Atrahasis before the flood. He had long been the god of dangerous wisdom, the kind that saves life and troubles order at the same time. Enki is never simple. That is what makes him useful to a story like this. He protects, but not always openly. He teaches, but not without risk. He bends rules, whispers through walls, sends dreams, gives counsel, and then sometimes withholds the final key. He can appear merciful and manipulative in the same myth. He is water under the locked door. In the source narrative, Enki opposes total elimination of human divine traits. He cannot openly undo the council decisions, or perhaps he will not. But he preserves fragments. He hides knowledge in sealed chambers. He warns chosen humans. He plants memory where destruction cannot easily reach. Imagine Eridu after the flood. The air is wet with marsh breath. Reeds move in the dark. The temple rises from layers of older temples, one memory built over another. Beneath its rooms, in the deep, cool places near the Abzu, a chamber waits. The entrance is narrow. The walls smell of clay, bitumen, and old water. Tablets are wrapped, sealed, hidden from those who would destroy them. Not every tablet contains a spell. Some contain measures, names, star cycles, healing instructions, old correspondences between plant and body, metal and flame, dream and omen. A teacher places one tablet into a niche. The sound is small, but the act is defiance. Secret schools begin in the source telling. After the flood, ordinary scribal training continues in public. Students learn signs, lists, contracts, hymns, and temple procedures. But beneath or behind that conventional learning, another curriculum survives. Not for everyone. Not openly. Selected students. Hidden lineages. Initiates who are taught fragments of the old perception, exercises of breath, sound, vater, memory, and bodily attention. The source speaks of restoration techniques using the essence of the primordial waters. It claims Enki developed methods to reawaken pieces of the old capacity. These methods could strengthen perception, restore partial God sight, extend vitality, or improve healing. Yet they brought side effects. Unstable dreams, strange sensitivity, isolation, physical strain. A mind opened too quickly may not know how to close itself again. Again, these claims are speculative within the source world. We cannot treat them as established history, but as mythic narrative. They carry a recognizable warning. Restoring what was taken is not the same as returning to innocence. A sealed gate opened by force may flood the room. The Igigi are assigned as watchers. They monitor Enki. They watch human learning. They observe the secret schools, the hidden chambers, the whispered lessons. The council has already seen what happens when humans learn too much. It does not intend to be surprised again, but watchers can change. This is another pattern older than empire. A guard sent to observe the prisoners may come to understand them. A messenger sent to enforce a decree may begin to doubt the decree. Distance keeps cruelty clean. Closeness complicates it. The source says some watchers begin to sympathize with humanity. They see diminished humans struggling under the loss. They see the cold hands of healers who almost remember the fire. They see astronomers writing what they once might have seen. They see children born under sealed senses, still reaching toward heaven in dreams. They see Enki preserving sparks in water-dark rooms. Some of them decide to teach. Here, the story touches the Watcher's tradition known from later texts, including the figure Semjaza and the 200 Watchers who descend. In the source interpretation, these beings transmit forbidden knowledge to humans. Metallurgy, astronomy, strategy, magical arts, biological manipulation. The old, restricted domains return, not fully, but widely enough to alarm heaven. The descent of the Watchers can be told as corruption, rebellion, mercy, or tragedy, depending on the tradition. The source frames it as a second wave of instruction, a challenge to the post-flood restrictions. Imagine them descending at night, not as monsters, not as bright heroes, as conflicted teachers, figures moving through starlight, carrying knowledge that should have remained sealed. Below, human settlements sleep. A few lamps burn. A student wakes before dawn and finds a teacher waiting at the edge of the fields, speaking of metals, stars, herbs, names, and the old ways of seeing. The gifts spread. Smiths learn deeper firework. Astronomers recover celestial cycles. Strategists build stronger societies. Ritual experts learn names that press on hidden powers. Healers discover methods that the official temples did not authorize. Some human bloodlines are enhanced, the source claims, and the children of the Watchers appear, carrying traits that disturb the divine order once again. The council responds. Emergency assembly. Names read. Powers questioned. The Watchers are tried. Their rebellion cannot be allowed to stand, because if forbidden knowledge spreads freely, the entire post-flood arrangement fails. The source describes imprisonment beneath the earth, stripped powers, sealed places, and campaigns against enhanced populations. Later traditions remember giants, monstrous offspring, corrupted lineages, and divine judgment. The source hears beneath those stories an old political struggle over human capacity. The teaching was too wide. The punishment was severe. Yet not all knowledge was destroyed. That may be the most important thread in the ending. Suppression never fully succeeds when memory has already entered human hands. A tablet can be hidden. A symbol can be coded. A bloodline can pass quietly. A ritual can be disguised as ordinary prayer. A star calculation can look like temple astronomy while carrying a deeper lesson. A myth can preserve instructions under the cover of story. Mystery schools rise. Babylonian, Egyptian, later Near Eastern, Mediterranean, and other traditions are brought into the source's wide comparison as vessels of preserved fragments. Some claims are strong and speculative. We should say that plainly. But the story logic is consistent. What was taken from humanity survives in concealed forms. Coded tablets, restricted chambers, initiation rites, sacred geometries, bloodline selection, consciousness expansion practices, astronomical timing. The old restoration project changes costume through the ages. The source speaks of the Great Wheel, a cycle of about 25,920 years, tied to precession, the slow turning of the heavens. It claims that ancient mystery schools tracked this cycle and expected periods when lost traits could return, when cosmic conditions would make restoration possible, when sealed senses might begin opening again. This is not mainstream historical certainty. It is a speculative framework. But as a dark, mythic ending, it is pout. The stars themselves become a clock for stolen inheritance. The sky that once was red directly becomes the calendar of return. Picture Babylon at night. A ziggurat rises under the stars. Priests stand on the upper platform, cloaks moving in a slight wind. Below, the city sleeps, full of ordinary hunger, ordinary fear, ordinary dreams. Above, the constellations turn with unbearable slowness. A scribe marks the movement, not because tomorrow needs a market date only, but because the long wheel may be approaching a hidden threshold. Somewhere else, beneath a temple floor, A chamber waits. In it are tablets no public student is allowed to copy. Symbols too old to be explained directly. Exercises of breath and sound. Genealogies. Lists of favorable stars. Instructions written in a language that looks practical to the uninitiated and dangerous to the one trained to see. The idea is simple and haunting. The divine traits were not fully destroyed. They were scattered. A little in blood. A little in memory. A little in craft. A little in myth. A little in forbidden teaching. A little in the stubborn human refusal to remain dim. This is why the source ends not in complete despair, but in a question. What if the gods feared human weakness less than human return? What if the true danger was not that humans might learn something new, but that humans might remember what had once been theirs? Return to the clay tablet. It rests under museum light. Its surface is dry. The wedge marks hold no music unless a reader brings breath to them. Yet behind those marks is a whole sequence of loss and preservation. Divine blood, long reigns. The me, human noise. Plagi, famine, binding. Adapa, refusing life. Apkallu recalled from the waters. The tablet of destiny sealed. Temples altered. Senses dimmed. Bodies reduced. Guardians withdrawn. Enki whispering through deep water. Watchers descending with forbidden lessons. Hidden schools waiting under ordinary history. The story is not easy to believe literally. It should not be forced. But it is difficult to ignore as mythic memory. It gives form to a feeling many humans still carry. The feeling that we are less than we should be. That consciousness is partly asleep. That knowledge arrives in fragments. That the world is full of locked doors and old keys hidden in unlikely places. Maybe that feeling is only the ache of being human. Maybe it is the echo of myths built around loss. Maybe it is what happens when clay remembers divine blood. The fire beside us is almost out now. A red coal glows under gray ash. The candle shortens. The room grows quieter. Outside, the night holds its old patience. Somewhere far beyond this room, real rivers still move through Mesopotamian land. The ruins of Eridu remain low and weathered. The tablets remain in museums, archives, storerooms, and books, translated, argued over, doubted, loved, and misunderstood. They do not shout. They wait, just as clay always waits. In the source story, the Anunnaki took long life, direct sight, divine hearing, healing fire, full memory, and free access to the cosmic order. They sealed gates inside the mind, narrowed the human span, recalled the teachers, and turned living knowledge into guarded systems. But they did not take everything. They left curiosity. They left dreams. They left hunger for the hidden. They left the human hand that keeps making tools for lost senses. They left the scribe. They left the listener. They left the question. And perhaps that is why the old tablets still feel alive. Not because they prove every claim placed upon them, but because they preserve the shape of a fear that the gods did not create humanity weak, a fear that humanity was made powerful enough to frighten its makers. A fear that what was removed may one day return. The temple chamber is silent now. The water under Eridu is dark. The teachers have gone back to the deep. The watchers are chained in memory. The hidden schools have closed their doors for the night. Rest here by the fire. Let certainty sleep. Let the clay keep its secrets. Let the old question remain soft in the mind, not as proof, but as ember. What if the most dangerous thing in humanity was never what we became, but what we once were? Good night.